Hello, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my July wrap-up. So July was definitely not a very successful reading month. I only read 7 books, which for me is a little below my average because the first half of the month I was in a reading slump and I barely read at all in the first half of the month, but then somehow I read 7 books almost exclusively in the second half of the month. But anyway, the first one I read, I actually started in June, but like I said, reading slump. And I finished it almost a month after I started. But that is Our Share of Night. And that is a horror book. And in this one, we were following Juan and his son, Gaspar. And they were going to Gaspar's mother's family's house because she had died some time ago, and they were going there because we learned that they were all part of a cult, and one was actually the medium of the cult. He could contact ghosts and summon demons and just do a bunch of rituals for that cult. And we also learned that the cult, they wanted Gaspar for themselves. They wanted to, use him for their own plans, for their own goals. And Juan obviously didn't want his son to have that fate. So the main thing was them trying to get away from that. And in the beginning, I was very invested in that storyline I just explained, and I was, really interested to see where that was going. But then it kind of changed what was happening, and I wasn't as interested. And I mean, at the end, we got back to the plot of the beginning and I was interested again, but pretty much everything else, I was not really wanting to know about all of that. And also I feel like it was very long, way too long, and it had a lot of details and descriptions that I personally didn't find necessary. And also another issue for me was that it wasn't really divided into chapters. It was just divided into 6 parts. And long chapters are really not something I enjoy. They do not motivate me to read at all. And some of these parts were 120 pages long. So that was pretty much a 120 page long chapter. And that was not really motivating, like I said, to read. But anyway, I did really like the beginning. I did really like the ending. And the rest was okay. And I gave this one 3 stars. Then I read 2 books from the same series, and that was Abaddon's Gate and The Churn, which are books 3 and 3.5 in the Expanse series, which is a science fiction series. And in this world of this series, most of the solar system is colonized with humans. And we are following mostly Holden and his crew throughout the series. And then there are other random characters that appear in each book. And in this book, there was a wormhole that was formed somewhere in our solar system. And they had no idea where it led, how it worked. And there was another plot line that was another character that had a revenge plan against Holden. And that revenge plan made Holden have to go through the wormhole. And that set in motion a lot of things. And I really enjoyed it. It was really fun. It was also really confusing for the longest time, like these books usually are. Until you know how things are working and what is happening, it is very confusing, but it is also very fun. And I was really invested in both plot lines, the wormhole and also the revenge plan of that character. And speaking of the characters, they were all pretty interesting. I mean, Holden and his crew I already loved since book 1, but 2 of the new characters were also pretty interesting. And there was another one that I didn't really care about him. His POV was, I cared about what was happening, but not about him personally. It was not the most interesting point of view. But everything else was really fun, and overall I had a great time, and I gave this 4 stars. And then The Churn, it was actually set before the events of the main series, and we were following the past of a character that is part of Holden's crew, and we were basically learning about his life before he met the people from the crew, and the people he was dealing with, the businesses he was involved in. And it was fun to learn about his past, but it was nothing that made me really that excited, that intrigued, that interested. And I mean, it was okay, and I gave it 3 stars. Then I read Everything the Darkness Eats, and this was a horror book, and I went into it knowing absolutely nothing about like what this book even was about. I just knew that I had read other books from this author that I had really enjoyed, because the writing is it just makes me uncomfortable, and it's usually a very like body horror, disgusting kind of horror, which I do tend to really enjoy. But I went into it completely blind. I had no idea what this was about. And just like in the Expense book, there were 2 main plot lines. So we were following Malik and Brett, I think, and they were a couple, and they were being threatened and attacked by their homophobic neighbors. And we were also following basically how Malik was, plotting his revenge. And then there was another plot line there, like there was a man that was kidnapping people because he had summoned something, some entity, and he needed people to perform some sort of ritual because of that thing he had summoned. And I said that this author usually, like, it just makes me feel very uncomfortable, like the horror, and it's very disgusting and descriptive, but I feel like it wasn't. But the only thing that made me uncomfortable in this book was like the real life horrors, like horrible people doing horrible things, which is not the type of horror that I like. I prefer to read about, supernatural things, like things that are not horrible already, like in real life. And so the like supernatural part, it was like interesting. I wasn't like exactly bored reading it, but I was also not like loving it, like dying to know what was gonna happen. And when the 2 storylines kind of came together, it was pretty underwhelming, like the way that it happened and like the significance or lack of significance that it had. And I mean, it was okay, and I gave it 3 stars. Then I read We Spread, and this was another horror book, and in this one we were following Penny, and she was an artist. She used to be an artist, and she had been living in the same apartment for decades, and she had been living alone there since her partner passed away. And at the beginning of the book, after a few incidents, she is taken to a long-term care residence because she's thought to no longer be able to take care of herself. And after she starts living there, she meets some of the other people who live there. And in the beginning, everything seems to be going well. Like she feels taken care of, she feels happy, she feels good, she feels healthier than before. But then things start going wrong, and there are some weird things happening, some sinister things that definitely did make me uncomfortable. But the thing is, we didn't really know if things were actually happening or if it was just Penny, because basically the whole point of this book is the fear of aging and basically not being able to trust yourself, trust your own mind. And we never really know if what happens is real or not. And sometimes I really want like answers in books. Sometimes I don't really mind not having answers. And in this case, I feel like it's scarier to not know. But like if you really need answers in your books, I don't think this would be the book for you, because even at the very end of the book, you are left with questions with like what just happened at the end. You're not entirely sure. But for me, it was a very scary and uncomfortable, and the things that were happening were pretty creepy, and I give this one 5 stars. Then I read Divine Rivals, and this is a fantasy romance and the first book in the Letters of Enchantment series. And in this book, we were following 2 journalists, Iris and Roman, and they both wanted the same promotion at work. And Iris wanted the promotion because she is trying to save her family, and she thought that this was the only way because her mom is struggling with addiction and her brother is missing at war. And the war is a war between 2 gods, and Iris is trying to contract her brother, and she is like sending him letters, but some way, magically, the letters end up in Roman's room, and so they start, writing to each other. But Roman knows that he's talking to Iris. Iris doesn't know who she's talking to. She just knows that it's not her brother. And obviously they, develop a connection from there, and that is the whole romance thing that I did not like at all. And so, I was hoping the fantasy part would save it for me, but we didn't really get as much from the fantasy as I wanted. Like, what we did get, like, from the gods and the lore involving that, I did really enjoy, but I feel like we didn't really get enough of it. And also the characters, they were okay, but no one really like stood out for me, the main characters and the side characters. And actually, like, what happened at the epilogue was pretty interesting. Like, it makes things possibly a lot more interesting for the future. But having said that, I don't think I will continue with the series, because like, it was okay, but I mean, I probably won't think about it ever again. And yeah, it didn't really work for me. I give it 3 stars. And the 7th and last book that I read was The Naturals, and this is the first book in the Naturals series, which is a YA mystery series. And we are following Cassie, who is, I think, 17 years old, and she is a natural profiler. So she's a natural at reading people, basically. And one day she's contacted by the FBI because they have a program with other teenagers who are like naturals at other things. There's another profiler. There's a guy who's a natural at reading emotions. There's a girl that's a natural at like numbers and statistics and all of that. And then there's a girl who's like a lie detector, basically. She can tell when anyone's lying, and she is a very good liar herself. And they are supposed to be focusing on cold cases, trying to, find something that other agents have missed and trying to solve those cold cases. And one case that Cassie personally wants solved is the case of her mother's disappearance / murder, because her body was never found, but she's pretty sure that her mom is dead. And so that's one of her motivations to join that program in the FBI. And while they are, working and trying to learn about those cold cases and also having sort of classes with the agents there is a current serial killer that might be connected to what happened to Cassie's mom. And so obviously she is way more interested in learning about that current case, and so are the other people there. And I really liked the investigation. It was really fun. And I mean, it was definitely very YA, like the characters, but that was exactly what I was expecting. And the plot twist was also pretty fun. And I really liked the dynamic of their group, like the way they work together and the way they really don't work together. And yeah, it was a very fun, fast, easy read. I like flew through that book and had a great time with it, and I gave it 4 stars. And yeah, those were the 7 books that I read in July. And I usually don't do TBRs, but like I am in the middle of 2 books that are parts of series, so I know some of the things that I'm gonna be reading in August. So I am in the middle of the 2nd book of The Naturals, and I'm planning on reading them all like back to back, so definitely want to finish the Natural series. And I am also not halfway through, I'm like 40 something % through Ship of Magic, which is the first book in the Live Ship Trader series, which is a part of the Realm of the Elderlings universe. Is that what it's called? I hope that's what it's called. So yeah, definitely will be finishing this one, and I don't know if I can read the other 2 books in the series because they're like 900 pages long, and I am gonna be gone for a week. So, that might not happen, but it's definitely in my plans to read as much as possible from this series as well. And honestly, everything else, I have absolutely no idea, but that is my mini August TBR. And yeah, I think that is everything for this video as well. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you have enjoyed it. And if you did, give it a like and subscribe, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!